Hi, everyone. It's Kevin Raymond once again. I'm here with Kevin Raymond Coaching, and I'm really happy to be sharing some time with Bill Kirst today. And I'm going to give him the floor to introduce himself. And everyone, welcome, Bill,
Thank you. I appreciate it, Kevin. It's great to meet you. I've been
for
following your
sure.
your work for quite a while now. It's great to connect.
Thanks.
So yeah, I'm Bill Kirst. I am a recent author. I published my first book. I'm also a
Hmm.
podcast host. I've been hosting a podcast called Coffee and Change for going on 7 years.
Wow,
Uh,
cool.
Thank you. It's definitely been a passion project. We'll probably talk a little bit
Hmm.
about that today.
For sure.
And I'm also a change management expert. I've been doing organizational change management for over 20 years, guiding large organizations, enterprises, nonprofits, universities, tech companies through, tantamount amounts of change.
Hmm.
And one of the things I've learned along that course and along that journey is probably very similar to the work that you and your peers and the community of coaches do is it's really about helping people feel belonging in the world, feel less
Yeah.
alone in the world, and really achieve their dreams. I mean, change management is just kind of a more socially accepted way in enterprises to reach those outcomes and milestones for individuals. So it's been a real privilege to guide
Hmm.
people in that work for over 20 years. I'm also an Army veteran. I was in the U.S. Army for
Hmm.
12 years. And I'm one of six kids.
Oh, wow.
And I live in Seattle, Washington. So there's a lot more there, but we'll start there and see where the conversation goes.
Okay, I find it amazing that like when I was reading some of your history and stuff, and your background and the number of years and everything, I'm like, how is this possible? The guy looks like he's 12 years old. That's crazy.
Well, it's also
I was,
part of the reason
I,
I grow the beard, Kevin,
yeah, I
and I
know.
wear the glasses is because if I don't have the beard, and these glasses are actually not prescription, they're the blue blocker glasses.
Oh, okay,
But if I don't have the glasses and I shave the beard, I truly look
yeah,
14. So,
I'm sure you do. Like it's crazy, and somebody would be like, "How did you even have this experience? That's crazy." So, um, my beard's much more gray. So,
well, I'm working on it. You can see some there.
yeah,
I work hard for
I
it.
know,
So,
eh? It's mine's been great for a long time. Um, so what I wanted to do, let's just talk about first your book and
sure.
just give us a history of that, how it came about, and what it means to you.
Yeah. So, my book is called Everward, and it's a poetry collection. And it's really interesting that we kind of started this place because I was listening to um, Rick Rubin's recent book last night. I have it on audio as well as a print edition. And one of the things that Rick Rubin, in his book talks about was he calls these acts of creativity, especially your first work where you publish something or
Right.
put something out in the world, he calls them small works. And when I thought about that last night while listening to that audiobook, I thought that's what this was. This was a small work for me. And the
Hmm.
reason it was a small work is because I've always had a dream of publishing books, novels,
Hmm.
and life doesn't always happen according to your plan and according to your dreams. So,
Really?
yeah, believe it or not,
Come on,
um,
not to lie.
it's probably why, folks in your community stay gainfully employed because life doesn't happen as we hope, which is why we tap
Hmm.
friends and coaches to help. But I went through a recent change. I was actually working at Microsoft at the time, and 10,000 people were laid off at Microsoft
Hmm.
in a matter of days. And I was included in that layoff with my entire
Okay.
team. And what was interesting for me was the job I had at Microsoft actually came to me because of my podcast. So Microsoft heard my podcast. They reached out to me and said, "Hey, we heard this. What you're doing is really, really powerful and really unique. You're
Hmm.
having conversations with people about change, but you're capturing in their stories. And we need some of that storytelling. And we need somebody who could ask really critical, deep, vulnerable, genuine questions
Hmm.
so that we can grow and become who we
Right.
want to become." And so they invited me to join them. And it was an amazing experience. But one of the things I learned was I attached the word dream and the word job together when I
Hmm.
took that. And looking back on it, Kevin, one of my greatest lessons is that those two words are not necessarily supposed to be commingled. You should have your
Together.
dreams
Yeah.
and you should have your vocation. and you should have your
Right.
avocation. But rarely are those two going to be truly in the same bucket.
Hmm.
And when the layoff happened, I realized um, that I was about to embark on a grief journey. And I needed to figure out how to do that. So one of the things I
Hmm.
did amidst all of my reflection was I went back to old journals and
Oh,
diaries,
okay.
and I had shelves full of these things,
Really.
Kevin. I mean, they were in
Like a
boxes.
collection.
Yeah, like a
That's
collection.
great though.
They were in
Yeah.
boxes, they were up on shelves, they were tucked away. And I thought to myself, well, if this is an opportunity for me to start again, to read new, to find
Hmm.
something that's new, why not orient in the things that I wrote from a different place, from a different chapter, from a
Right.
different journey? And so I started going through all of these journals and I realized there was so much poetry in these diaries and journals. And I started tearing out the pages and putting them on the floor here in my office.
Hmm.
And before I knew it, I looked down and pretty much every square inch of my office was covered
Wow.
in a sheet of paper. And I was literally standing in a collection
On them.
on them.
Yeah.
And I picked them up and I said to myself, well, what are you going to do now? You can't put them back in the diaries. You can't put them back in the journals. What are you going to do? Put them up on a shelf again till you move, and
Hmm.
then you're just going to store them away? So I collected them, put them in a bag, went to my nearest cafe my favorite cafe that I go get
Hmm.
tea, go get like a London fog tea at, and I transcribed them. So they went from all of these were handwritten to digital
Hmm.
format. And then I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it. And I just kind of put it away. And over the next sort of month, I would open and read these. And I realized, wow, these are kind of thematic.
Hmm.
And the themes that they kind of emerged from ended up kind of becoming the way I organized what was my first collection. And so the first part of the collection is titled I Will, I Am with an ellipsis in the middle. And that's obviously a play on my name, I, William.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
every poem in that part starts off with with something that talks about something that I will, so an action, and then I
Right.
am, and an intention. Part two of the collection ended up being a theme titled Grief is a Teacher, and part three ended up being a theme titled Planet Waking. And I didn't really intend for all of these things to emerge, but before I knew it, I had this 88-page collection of poetry,
Wow.
and I then went on this journey to figure out how am I going to self-publish it. And that is a
Hmm.
whole nother adventure, which
Yes, I'm
we can
sure it
talk
is.
about.
Yeah. So I'm just curious to know, in when you were pulling all that stuff together, what kind of a time frame are we talking about? Like in your
Sure.
life,
Yeah.
what span of time was it? Is it or does it cover?
Yeah, so the poems themselves probably span being written in their original format up to 20 years ago. If I if
Oh,
I
okay.
if I really
Okay.
look back onto when some of these emerged out of my
Hmm.
consciousness onto the page the first time, it is anywhere between 20 years ago and as recent as a year ago.
Okay. So
So
from pretty much your whole lifespan. So it's a little bit of where you've been and how
yeah,
you
I mean
got
it
there.
definitely
Okay.
covers, I would say, most of my professional and adult life. I think
Hmm.
there were some things in journals and diaries that probably go back before then, maybe
Yeah.
my formative years, teenage years, but I wanted to keep those a little bit sacred. Not necessarily
Hmm.
have them in this first
Right.
collection. They might see the light of day in another collection, but this
Hmm.
was one that spanned about 20 years of my adult life. Yes.
Okay. How did a couple of questions, I guess. How did it make you feel when you actually had put it all together and actually saw your book for the first time?
Um, it's hard to put into words that feeling.
Hmm.
The way that I can describe it was I felt lighter than I've ever felt.
Really?
And I felt like I was a little bit invincible. And what I mean by
Hmm.
that is once it's out there, once it's
Yeah.
published, once it's in your hands, once people are ordering it, once somebody calls you and says, "Hey, can I get an autographed copy?" It's a very humbling moment.
Yeah.
But what's the best part about it, Kevin, is that you created something
Yeah.
and it's out
For
there in the world,
sure.
and nobody can tell you that you're not a creator.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. A little bit more intense than a post on Instagram, though.
And a lot more work. Let me tell you, a lot
Right?
more work.
I know. So that
Um,
was my next question. I wanted to just like I know it's a lot to get into, but I
oh,
just a
sure.
kind of an overview of exactly what that process of self-publishing is like. Because
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of people out there that I think it's a discouragement for them to
Hmm.
it's too much, right? I mean, even
Yeah.
myself, like a couple of years ago, I wrote a children's book,
Hmm.
and it's ready to go, but I've never done anything with it. So like I hope to
Okay.
one day. But
Yeah.
it's like one of those things that I just got into it and then I'm just like, this is so much work. And I have too many other things to do. So I didn't bother.
Yeah.
But so enlighten us on what that
Yeah.
process is and
Well, like most things, I will start off by saying the last 10% took 80% of the effort, right?
right.
So what I mean by that is in the self-publishing world, and for those that have explored it a little bit, there's a couple
Hmm.
different routes you can go, but we'll just talk about the most popular one, the one that I went down the route, which is the Kindle Direct Publishing. It's through the
Right.
Amazon publishing house. And that does tend to be the easiest one for folks to
Yeah.
onboard, meaning let's get, you get started. But
Right.
it's kind of a masterclass in figuring out all the ways in which
Hmm.
content gets out there. So you have to start off by um, getting something called an ISBN number. It's sort of the international
Yeah.
number that's
Like
associated
a
with books.
right.
And what I learned was that there's one entity that you go through to buy that ISBN number. And again, it shouldn't be surprising to anyone, but everything always has a little bit of an angle to it, right? So you think,
Yeah.
oh, I just need one. You go to buy one, and then you get this nice little promotional message that says, well, if you plan to be a future author and publish other novels, you might as well get a pack of 10 because it's cheaper, right? So you start to
Oh, so you
understand
need a different one for every book you publish. Okay.
precisely. And you need
Okay.
a
So
different
it's like,
one for ebooks and for printed books.
of course
So
you
yeah, of course you do. So for me, I knew I needed at least two, if not three. Three
Right,
because if I plan to turn it into an audiobook.
right.
So I said, well, now I'm looking at three. I might as well do the math in my head. And you do get kind of a bulk discount. So I went ahead and bought 10.
Hmm.
Well, that sets you on the path of like, well, now you've got these 10 ISBNs, so
Gotta use them.
use
Yeah.
them. The next stage is you go in and you actually have to figure out your manuscript, as they call it. And it's not as simple as just having your stuff in Microsoft Word or Google
Hmm.
Docs and sort of uploading it. There are lots of vendors that are kind of in between, different software vendors that will
Yeah.
take your Microsoft Word or Google Docs content and put it in the format that is easily digestible, consumable by the engine that
Right.
powers Kindle Direct Publishing. So it's a little bit tricky there. And there are many countless videos out there on YouTube about this. What I will
Yeah.
say to folks is um, my cautionary tale is don't get too caught up and too swept up in the people that say, I can give you all the answers and I can guide you through it.
Hmm.
Because I believe personally this should be a little bit of a crucible, a chrysalis for
Yeah.
you as you figure it
Sure.
out. Um,
Yeah.
So once you figure that out and get it into both ebook format as well as printing format, then you upload the manuscript. It goes through the engines of Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing. They let you know
Hmm.
if there's any errors to it. The trickiest part for me was the cover, the actual illustration cover,
Right.
the the wording, the back, all of this.
Right.
And the reason being is because they give you some guidelines and they'll say it needs to be this resolution, it needs to be this size,
Right.
and they give you a template, which works great. But this is where it got tricky. You submit the cover, and they say, we will let you know if it's been approved, meaning if it's printable
Hmm.
in about 6 hours. And you said, okay. So you upload it, and maybe about 4 or 5 hours later, you get a rejection message. And the rejection message says, your cover artwork has been rejected for one of these possible 10 reasons.
Nice.
So so you're like, okay, it could be the color, it could be the font, it could be the bleed, it could
Oh my
be
goodness.
the side. So when I say the last 10% took 80% of the time,
For
imagine the
sure.
matrix that I had to come up with, Kevin, to figure out, okay, if I
Yeah.
change this
Like, how do
color
you
and
even do that?
resubmit, you just change color, resubmit,
And
change the
just do,
bleed, resubmit, change.
oh my goodness.
So I must have had, I'm not even kidding you, like I must have had 62 versions of this cover all over my desktop
Wow.
to say which one's going to take. And here's the best part about it. This is where life sort of makes you laugh at times.
Yeah.
So for all those rejections that I got, and I had to go through the matrix of
Yeah.
variables to try and get the right one, when it was finally accepted, I got no status message. I didn't know. 6 hours went by, 12 hours went by, 16 hours went by, and I thought, well, I didn't hear anything. And then the next day, you get a message that says, congratulations, your book is published. And I was like, wait, what?
Okay. I love it.
So I went from
That's great.
having to
Wow.
wonder if I was going to hit a publication date
Yeah.
to hearing nothing to congratulations, your
Too
book is
done.
published.
That's
Um,
hilarious.
and the other thing I will share with you is each author is actually supposed to get what's called, um, it's kind of like an author copy. So
Right.
across the front of it, it has stamped like, print only. You're
Right.
supposed to get that approximately a week to a week and a half before anybody else
It
can
gets
order it.
done. Oh
My author copy came 4 weeks after everybody else had it on the market.
wow. Well, I guess because they thought you've already read it, so it'd be okay.
Well, but to your point, to hold something in your hands, it's
Yes,
like
exactly. That's pretty
that's when it's
impressive.
real to you. And
Yeah,
so when I had
exactly.
friends sending me pictures of it from places like
And you're
Quebec
like,
City,
I don't
I,
even have it myself.
yeah. So I share that from the standpoint of it was a lot to learn. And I'm glad you asked the
Yeah.
questions, and I'm glad that you wrote this children's book and you actually have it and you want to do something with it because
Hmm.
now, in addition to being a published poet, I find it really important to guide people who have stories to tell through this process of
Yeah, that's
self-publishing because
great.
it was not intuitive. In
Hmm.
fact, it's not only not intuitive, I think in some ways it's intentionally discouraging that you get this close to
Mm.
the finish line and then you say, I just can't
And
figure it out.
then,
It's and then you call an agent or you call
yeah.
a person who knows somebody. And I wonder, it's just a question I have in my mind. I wonder if some of that hierarchy
Hmm.
and those thresholds that are put in your way are intentional.
I I would have to say I agree with that because when I was looking into it, and I did find the same frustrations, like in terms of like, okay, wow, there's going to be a lot of more time than I have right now. Um, but there were always popping up the opportunity to take it to a publisher or to step it up to the next level of Amazon, even where you
Right.
paid a fee and then blah blah blah, right?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
and I talked to a few people. There was a couple of people. I guess during COVID, there were a friend of mine was part of a group that wrote a book, and she did like a section or
Hmm.
chapter or something, and it was like a coffee table book. I can't remember the name of it, but it was the same idea. This guy's Palm Springs, and he did this publishing, and I think it's called Coffee Table or Coffee Time, something like that. Um, but she was saying the same thing. She was trying to say to me when I was talking to her about my kids, she was just like, "I know it's really easy," but I don't like. Her part was really easy, but then I think once if I asked that guy, it was not
Hmm.
the same story, right? It's like not easy. It's quite complicated and just time consuming and a lot of things. So, but I'm really glad that you got to that point, and now you have what 9 more to go.
Yeah, it's funny. It does set you up for this sense of, in one aspect, I feel this huge sense of accomplishment, even while facing all of you know, those things that tried to stop you along the way. And one of the things I kept saying to myself, and I know you've talked about with some of your, other guests and other interviews, sort of that power of a mantra, like kind of having a mantra for
Hmm.
yourself. And one of the things
Yeah.
I kept saying to myself is, well, you've clearly never met a cursed because we don't give
Yeah.
up.
Exactly.
And
Right.
on those days that I needed to go step away from the computer, I was frustrated. I couldn't watch another YouTube video where the person tells you they're going to tell you the answer. They get
And
to the last minute and say, if you want the answer, sign up for my
I
course.
exactly. I know there's so many of those.
There are.
That's
Um,
yeah,
which
it's
is why
crazy.
which is why I feel really compelled, Kevin, now that I've been through this gauntlet, that it's
Hmm.
really important that I share this knowledge with people for free because
Yeah, it's
your
great.
story matters. Everybody's story matters. The
Yeah,
only way we're going to heal is through stories told. So if somebody comes in
absolutely.
and they're an arbiter of that and they say, "Oh no, you cannot come beyond the drawbridge unless you pay,"
Hmm. Yeah.
that really bothers me.
Yeah, I get that. I totally get that. Okay, so obviously my next question would be, so what would you think your next book will be? Have you thought about it?
Oh, absolutely. I've got like three more books that are done.
Yeah. Okay.
So I've probably been authoring two novels simultaneously for the past
Oh, okay.
decade. Um,
Oh, wow.
and it's really interesting. Like one I started and it sort of took off. And then another one, there was one morning I got up at probably like 3:30 in the morning, shot up out of bed, went into the living room, grabbed a notebook and just started writing. And it was one of those moments where you lose track of time, you're in flow.
Hmm.
Then you look up and it's 6:30 and you've got close to 100 pages handwritten of
Wow.
what you don't even know. You're like,
Yeah.
what is this? And that novel started taking off a little bit. And I can tell you that one of the unexpected places and tools, if you want to call it this, happened. This was all before the pandemic, of course, but
Hmm.
I used to go to these they're I think they're called sensory deprivation saltwater tanks. Are you familiar with those?
Oh, yeah, yeah, I've heard of those. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And before COVID, they were kind of all the rage out here on the West Coast where
Hmm.
people would go and it was this way to restore and be completely in the darkness
Right.
and it's a pretty scary experience for a lot of people.
That would be
But once you
me.
get past that first
Yeah.
sort of 20 minutes of it and you're you're basically with your own thoughts and you have no distractions, no
Hmm.
devices. It's amazing what you can tap into from a subconscious standpoint. And I think
I agree. Yeah.
the first novel that probably started, and I'm using this word intentionally, downloading to me, really kind of came about almost backwards
Hmm.
in those deprivation tanks.
Wow.
And if you could imagine at the end of my hour-long floats, I would jump up, try not to fall because it's quite slippery with all the
Yeah,
salts.
exactly.
Kind of lean out over to grab my phone, hit the record button, and just start talking. And even now, when I go back and listen to some of those voice notes, it doesn't even sound like me.
Hmm.
And I believe that there is so much that is in our subconscious, and
Oh, for sure.
we
Yeah.
can't access it otherwise if
Yeah.
unless we turn off all of this
Yeah.
and go really, really still,
Yeah,
really, really deep, and
definitely.
really, really quiet.
Yeah.
And I think
And you
that's why
need
there are
to,
stories in everybody. There are books in
uh,
every one of us.
for sure, right? And it's just whether or not you can access that and be able to pull it out of you. But I think you know, I've looked at those tanks, or I've read about those tanks. I'm a total claustrophobic, so I'd be like,
I
I'm
am
not
too.
doing that, right? So I have a hard time with that, but I would love to give it a shot. But something I did do not too long ago, and you may have heard of it, it's called the 12-hour walk. And a
No.
gentleman wrote a book on that, and it's called the 12-hour walk. So this guy, it's a whole story about his life in Everest and climbing and everything. But the whole pretense is that he ventured out onto this 12-hour walk, which entailed just walking straight for 12 hours, no electronics or anything like that. And the whole purpose of it is kind of like a walking meditation. So you're in your thoughts in, and kind of taking in the environment and everything else like that, but you're alone and you're
Hmm.
just like, you're not talking to anyone, you're not doing anything, you're just walking. Um, and it's really quite remarkable. And I think it's something that he does like on a quarterly basis of the year. And I tried it. I read about it, and then if you want to participate like in a group one, not that you're going in a group, but if you register, you can. This is the day that everybody's setting off and doing this kind of thing or whatever. And it was quite interesting, like to one walk for that long and, and survive. But it was like, wow, my feet are killing me. Um, but it was interesting because it did, like you initially just start, walking along, but then as you go, obviously you're just getting deeper and deeper and deeper, and then you're sort of getting into, the depths of your thoughts and
Right.
kind of subconscious and things like that. Um, and you do suddenly become completely isolated in surroundings that are constantly active, like traffic and people, but it doesn't register with you at all. It's really quite remarkable. Similar
Yeah.
to me, to on a more long term basis, with there's this, I can't remember the name of it, but it's a group. They have them throughout. I probably in the States as well, where you go for 10 days, silent meditation. So
Hmm.
you go and they take everything away from you, and there's no speaking at all. There's just
Hmm.
sessions and meditation, meditation, meditation. And that was, again, I did that 1,000 years ago, but it was pretty remarkable as well. And it's
Yeah.
just like going to your point of being so, everybody having so much inside of them, but not ever giving themselves the opportunity to actually find it or release it or whatever
Hmm.
term you want to use for it, to get it out and let not necessarily the world but you
That's
have
right.
that,
Yeah.
to let you understand what you're all about, right? Like that's
Yeah.
the best part of it, is that you understand, like, what type of resilience you have, what thought, like abilities and things like that. So it's really quite remarkable, for sure.
Yeah, the thing that the 12-hour walk reminds me a little bit of is, and I actually just did one of these this Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I used to call them Silent Saturdays, and primarily because I was in a world, I was, in consulting for so long, and I was in this world where you would have these feverishly busy weeks, and then Friday would roll
Yeah.
around and you'd say to yourself, "Oh, I can't wait for the weekend." But in truth, did you really get a full weekend? Because let's think about it for a
Mm-hmm.
second. Friday rolls into Saturday. You're still thinking on Saturday, you're still
Yeah.
thinking about what was unresolved on Friday. You might give yourself Saturday night to be truly free of some of those thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Sunday rolls around, we start thinking about Monday, right? You start getting what we call the Sunday scaries. So
Yeah.
when did you actually have any time to yourself in your own mind? And that's when I started putting in this practice for myself called Silent Saturdays. And Silent Saturdays, it's not certainly not every Saturday, but it's a practice. And I
Mm-hmm.
will caveat this with, I don't have children, I don't have pets, so like I have a very different lifestyle situation. So some people
Right.
don't have the luxury of doing this, but I would not speak for 24 hours myself.
Oh,
And
don't ever tell my partner about this because he would love this. Oh, Kevin, you should practice the silent Saturday. He
um,
would be in heaven.
so
I'm not
it
even going to show him this video now.
Oh, well. Um, so it ended up being exactly what you described, which was me taking long walks with
Hmm.
myself.
Yeah.
And some people ask questions like, okay, does that mean you're not allowed to listen to any music or any podcast? And no, that's not the case. In fact, things that will stir something up in you, be it music, be it audiobooks, be it
Hmm.
I actually do those quite a bit, but I do make sure to have movement in there, and I'm not walking for 24 hours, but I will take
Yeah.
long walks as
Sure.
much in nature as I can. And the fascinating thing about it was kind of an experiment when I started off doing it in Seattle because I asked myself, can somebody go 24 hours without ever speaking and interacting with society and ordering things and going to get coffee and the answer is yes, right? We've got these
Absolutely.
devices and we just
Yeah.
order it up and we go and our name is printed on the coffee or we go to
You
the
just
library
grab
and
it.
the book has our name on it. We order the book, we
Yeah.
ordered, and I think this got more pronounced during COVID where people could just order
Hmm.
everything up. And interestingly enough, while it gave me a lot of sort of peace of mind that I could be in my own thoughts, the other takeaway for me was I missed community and I missed connection.
Hmm.
And emerging out of the 24 hours of silence, you were very careful, intentional, and beautiful with your words.
Hmm.
And that's a wonderful
Yeah,
thing to bring to a partner, to a household, to
absolutely.
children, to coworkers.
Hmm. Yeah.
And that's what I gifted myself, was that opportunity to truly slough off, right? The remnants of Friday, the scaries of Sunday,
Hmm.
be here.
Yeah, being present. And I get with that, there's also the unfortunate situation where people live in silence, not by choice, right? And
Yes,
that because they
yes.
don't have anyone, right? So,
Hmm.
um, you know, it's not always what we think it is, and it's, you know, it's difficult for some people. So it really, that in itself just makes you really think about a lot of different things, right? Especially this time of year. And if you're
Yeah.
aware of people that are, you know, in that situation, you know, kind of reach out to them and see if you can help them out. It would be good.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, that's so deep, and that could be such a huge rabbit hole to go down. But I did want to talk about, you know, change management
Hmm.
and your thoughts on that, and just, you know, your history on that, and
Sure.
what you think about it and stuff. Just because it is such a huge thing as well, right? And very important in employment, industries, you know, whatever. But and everyday life for people. So let's just touch on that a little bit and give us kind of your experience with it and your background, and go from there.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, my history and background in organizational change management is is kind of an interesting one, because I think I stumbled into it. People ask me, how did you find
Hmm.
this career? And my answer is usually, I didn't, it found me.
Hmm.
When I started my career in 2000, this wasn't really a thing. It wasn't really, there was no
Yeah.
certifications for it. There was no industry organizations and conferences around
Hmm.
it. And it's been called many things, as you probably
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Over the years. And as it sort of shaped and emerged and molded, I think for me, my invitation to it was not so much, hey, do you want to do this? But hey, you're really good at handling people's emotions.
Hmm.
You're very good at guiding people through ambiguity. You're quite talented at seeing where
Hmm.
uncertainty brings agitation to people.
Exactly.
And if I point back to where I think that all came from, Kevin, I think it was my upbringing. I owe it to
Hmm.
my parents, to my, my family. We grew up overseas in many different
Okay.
countries. I learned 6 languages growing up.
Wow.
I don't think I ever knew a time where some sort of change wasn't occurring
Hmm.
in my presence, in my body, in my learning, and it was survival for us.
Yeah.
And I I got really good at it because you had to be really good at it. And over the over the course of my career, I realized that I was tapping on a lot of those same lessons and wisdom that had been instilled in me.
Hmm.
Things like meet people where they're at, do your best to communicate with people using their language, be compassionate. You never know what people are going through.
Yeah. Yeah.
These were sort of these tenets of which I was very lucky to have growing up. And before I knew it, I was working in consulting, and there were people coming to me and saying, hey, can you head up the communications for this large transformation initiative? And I'd say, sure. And I
Hmm.
would communicate in a way that I'd want to receive the information. So I wasn't
Yeah.
writing these emails and newsletters as the hero that is the newsletter writer.
Yeah.
I wrote them from a place of, if I were the recipient of this newsletter and this message that is telling me change is coming, how would I want to feel?
Yeah.
What emotions would I want it to invoke? And I wrote from that place. And it just led to the next thing where people say, wow, this
Hmm.
is real. This sounds different. This feels different. People are responding differently. And that
Yeah.
led to my next opportunity, next opportunity, next opportunity. And
Hmm.
honestly, Kevin, I've never had to look for a job.
Yeah.
The jobs have found me every time.
It's what I find so amazing about what you just talked about is that, you know, from the beginning of time, you'll see like there's tons of people out there that, myself included, leadership, management, communication, all of those things, right? But all of them all end up being from the same root, basically, which is empathy,
Hmm.
understanding, consideration, common sense, like all of these things. And there's like a million people out there every day pushing their stuff on leadership and everything else like that. And it's always the same thing. It's
Hmm.
common. It's like so much common sense and so much empathy and compassion and understanding that, like, put yourself in those shoes. It's
Yeah,
it's not complicated stuff, right? Yet it is something that is so seldom utilized. And there's that fear of people being in a position where they're going to lose their status if they let someone who could possibly communicate that information better than them do it. Do you know what I mean? Like
absolutely.
it's so unfortunate and so frustrating sometimes because you see it day after day after day and you're just thinking like, how is this still from the very beginning of time
Yeah.
such an issue? Like, and it brings you back to, just looking at current situations in the world,
Hmm.
how short a human being's memory actually is,
Right.
and how little they retain in terms of, oh yeah, you know, this is how you do this. This is what I should be doing. This is what means to be considerate of someone else's feelings or where somebody else is. And that simple thing you said about, you know, never knowing what somebody's going through when
Hmm.
you assume you have those answers, right? And it's so wrong to do that.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I
I
think,
totally agree.
yeah, it's just to your point, there's this importance of getting back to the beautiful basics.
Yeah.
And I think we can get very caught up in the next certification, the next you need
Hmm.
this. And and it's sort of that scarcity mentality that I've always sort of pushed away and felt
Hmm.
it's not for me. Simon Sinek wrote a great book called The Infinite Game.
Yeah.
And this concept of let's take it away from a zero-sum game and make it an infinite game, right? In order for me to win doesn't mean you have to lose. But so much of our systems and business and archetypes and institutions and leadership models are based in that zero-sum
I
game.
know, win or lose, right?
Yeah.
Everything is based on win or lose, which is
And
wrong.
and it is. It's to the
Yeah.
to the core and to your heart, it's wrong. And
Yeah.
I believe that people are coming to a place where they're starting to speak up about it. And
Hmm.
sometimes it's in poetry collections. There's plenty in here that people would read and say, wow, it sounds like that's a bit of a manifesto in one way or
Hmm.
another. And yeah, it's a heart manifesto in some ways because, when it comes to change, right? Change is the great equalizer. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter who you are. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter how many
Yeah.
certifications or degrees you have. When change is introduced to the human body, we resist it. It's
Yeah.
everybody responds the same way. You can see it neurologically, physiologically,
Yeah.
emotionally, psychologically. It's the great equalizer. The other great equalizer is grief.
Hmm.
And if we take lessons from each of those, how we navigate and lead through change, how we caretake and hold grief, I personally believe that we can work through anything, but it
Yeah. Those
starts
are the
with the
components.
humanity. It
Yes.
gets back to
Right.
the humanity.
Absolutely. That is like so true. And it's such a, I don't know. I find myself getting frustrated sometimes because it's so clear, yet it's invisible to so many people,
Yeah,
right?
isn't that the
With this.
irony of it all? It's like right there,
Yeah.
but we can't grasp
Hello.
it.
I know, right? It's like when you send a kid to the fridge to get something, we don't have any,
Right.
right? And it's the first thing on the shelf. I don't
And
see it.
that's why things like music and poetry
Hmm.
and the arts and
Yes.
creativity and expression, that's why those are just as important in my toolbox or anybody's toolbox as
Hmm.
anything, because I personally believe that, I mean, I wouldn't be here without poetry and music. I just
Hmm.
wouldn't. And I personally believe that in those moments where we say, I want that thing, but it doesn't seem
Hmm.
graspable, and that's not a word, but I
Right.
just made it up. It's in the invisible, it's in the liminal. Things like poetry help us get to it
Get there. Yeah. Yeah.
because
Exactly.
you get back in your body, and there's this fusion that happens between your head and your heart
Yeah.
that you're not going to get in a leadership manual. I mean, you've talked about this with some of your former guests. Leadership is lonely.
Hmm.
At its
Yes.
core, leadership
Yeah.
is a loneliness journey.
Yeah. For sure.
And
Yeah.
if we don't start helping some of these leaders, A,
Yeah.
understand who they are, and B, figure out how to hold both grief and change,
Hmm.
then we're setting them up for failure. And all the people that are in their caretaking, in their
Yeah.
flock, if you will.
That's the biggest issue is that, there's so many people in that position that, could, could do amazing things, but are not aware of what tools are available to them or how to even be present in their own self-awareness to be
Right.
able to help other people, and they don't have that connectivity to it and how it relates to all of those other people, right? And how it relates
Hmm.
to, building your team and being part of your team, and how you acquire the ability to have your team come to you, so that there's that communication, and there's that empathy and belief that they are capable of doing something better than what they are doing, and it's your job to take them there. And
Right.
people can do that, but because for example, some of my clients that I work with, they are in positions like, startup company. They, start out, maybe 5 people, right? And then, oh wow, we have 600 people now, right? And then they grow so quickly. They put people in positions, no training, no development,
Right.
and they deserve to be there because they've been there through the course of time, but they didn't have the training that it takes to do what they need to do to get beyond. And then you have somebody who started this whole thing who doesn't want to relinquish any control. So it really creates a really negative and harsh environment, and they need somebody to come in and show them, this is how this can work for you. This, I can help you with this and bring you here from here. Take this pain,
Right.
turn it into this joy, right?
Yeah.
And that's the key.
Yeah, it's interesting as just as I was kind of reflecting back on even my own journey, one of the fascinating things that sort of when I look at it on paper, I think to myself, did I do that? Is this real? Is this real? I've
Yeah.
worked for three of the largest organizations in the world, the US Army or the US military,
Yeah.
IBM, and Microsoft.
And Microsoft. Yeah.
And those are three huge, like not only brand recognition, but just, sprawl and spread and every single one of those jobs or careers or journeys, I chose to lead with the heart.
Hmm.
And it made my experience what it was. It didn't
Yeah.
matter that I was part of an organization of 500 or 800,000
Exactly.
people, right? This is a one-to-one, person to person, one to many, conversation by
Yeah.
conversation, connection by connection. All business
Hmm.
is a collection of humans trying to go towards the
Yeah.
same outcome. That's all it is.
Yeah.
And if we can remember that and approach that from a place of vulnerability, empathy, and compassion, the rest of it's logistics.
Exactly. Yeah. That is so true, right? Because like, there's the same end game for everything, and there's all these tracks of people going through it, and hopefully, somebody can share that vision so that everybody understands it and gets to the end, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's kind of what it's all about.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a good place to leave it where we are
Yeah.
today. However, you are like, you're the dream guest, and would love to do this again because it's just,
Yeah.
you did so much. So I would love to bring you back, and just have more conversations. This has
I
been
would,
absolutely incredible.
yeah, I would love that and welcome that. This has been, again, it's one of those things where the time went by like that.
I know. I knew that
Which
would
is,
happen though. Just like not knowing you, because I don't know you that well, but just reading your background and things like that, and just the few conversations we've had, I'm like, it's really only going to be like one topic, and it's going to be like we're going to have to do this like 20 times. But real pleasure,
Yeah,
absolutely
thank you.
amazing. So thank you
Thank you.
very much for spending time with
I
me.
appreciate the invite and the opportunity. It's a great way to start a week.
Yeah,
And happy to join again in the future. And
for
appreciate all
sure.
you're doing, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate you too. And what's the best way people to get a hold of you if they want to touch base? And I'll
Sure.
put it up on the thing afterwards.
Yeah, so I probably have the most presence on LinkedIn, so people can just look
Okay.
at Bill Kirst on LinkedIn
Okay.
and follow me there. A lot of people usually say to themselves, "Hey, I want to do the connect button," and follow. You're going to get the same stuff, right? I think to connect
Hmm.
with me, you need my email, but so hit follow. You'll get all the stuff I
Okay.
post there. My podcast called Coffee and Change is
Yes.
on all the platforms. So I also have an Instagram for Coffee and Change,
Yeah, I follow that.
coffee.and.change. And then if people are interested in the poetry,
Yes.
you can just search Everward, and it's under WG Kirst. And people ask, is
Okay.
that like your pen name? And no, it's actually my given name. William G is my middle
My
initial, Kirst. Um, and so that's on Amazon. You can get
yeah,
it as an ebook or a printed book. I hope to do the audiobook using my own voice here soon. And
that'd be great.
yeah, so those are probably the best places to start. And the good news is I carefully curate with intention a digital brand and a persona online. So it's not
Perfect.
hard to find me.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so
Me
much.
too.
Enjoy the rest of your week
Thank
and
you. You too.
take care. All right.
Thank you. Appreciate it.